Hello, and thank you for joining us for this session of the On the Mark Financial Forum and Podcast. Today, I am joined by Jon Standring of Beachside Partners, and I'm excited to have you, Jon. Thank you so much for joining.
I appreciate you having me, Mark. Thanks.
Of course, of course. Why don't you introduce yourself to the group so they know who you are?
Great. Yeah, as you mentioned, my name's Jon Standring. I am the founder of Beachside Partners. I live here in Santa Barbara with my beautiful wife, who is my college sweetheart from UCSB, and we're raising three boys, James, Jacob, and Luke.
I hope you have padded walls. I have one
That's
boy, and yeah, that's a
Yeah,
lot. That's a lot of
we've
mail.
got a lot of energy. We're just starting baseball season, just ended basketball, going right into
Yeah,
baseball.
I'm
So
right
we're
there with
we're
you, right there.
love it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, well, when we're not guiding our children, we're guiding people through lots of important real estate decisions. And the one that really stood out when we first met, because I think both of us have some unique perspectives on this topic, is what to do if somebody owns a home and they want to buy another one, whether it be owner occupied, or they're buying another home for themselves or their family to live in, or potentially as an investor, because I know you do a lot with investors as well, and just kind of what the thought process should be on how to make those decisions in an informed and productive way. So maybe tell us a little bit about Beachside Partners and what you guys do for people, because I think that context is relevant to our discussion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've been in real estate almost 15 years. I started in the corporate leasing world working for a Fortune 500. In 2010, I was moved over to traditional. I got my California broker's license, went to a large firm and started selling multifamily properties. So multifamily can be 2 to 4 units or it can be 5+ units, which goes over to commercial lending. I did that for about 2.5 years, and then I went and worked for a real estate developer for a year, where I joked that I got my master's degree in tenants, toilets, and trash.
Maybe in
It
the
was
opposite
really,
order.
yeah, right. It's something that in retrospect, it was such an interesting time for me between my time with a larger real estate brokerage and the real estate developer, because it allowed me to kind of focus on what I really wanted to be doing, which was kind of twofolds. One was be a true advisor. So we were at Beach when I started Beachside Partners, my mantra was multifamily advisors with a true passion for trying to talk people, don't sell that, don't buy that, which is so backwards in the world of real estate. But in a small town like Santa Barbara, I knew that by doing the right thing for the right people over time, you create a reputation. Fast forward, it's been 10 years. There's myself and three other agents. We go from Ventura County all the way up to San Luis Obispo County. And we've had a lot of success, primarily only in the multifamily world. I do sell a couple single families here and there, or even known to sell a couple condos, but our real bread and butter is multifamily, and that advisory role is really key, because knowing a lot of time people will inherit an asset or they'll have an asset and they don't understand what their options are instead of selling it. And when you look at estate planning and truly understanding what's going to be in the best interest, maybe not for who inherited the property, but down the line, there's a lot more options than people think.
There
You
are.
know, debt plays a big role in that as well. People think it's a big scary word, but in actuality, it can be the best option sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big proponent of debt based on what I do for a living, even though I'm primarily on the residential side. But yeah, you can avoid all sorts of issues by taking out debt. It's a non-taxable event. I mean, I'm not going to get into all the beauties of
I
what.
love it. We could talk about that the whole time. We can talk about it all day.
Well, I really want to turn to something really interesting, which is taxes.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when people are making that decision, should I sell? Should I buy? And it's a little bit different if you're buying, for investment purposes, you're selling an investment property, buying another, that maybe you do a 1031 for. But when you're doing it on the residential side, it's for your own residence. It's a big consideration. Like, do you keep that property? Do you sell it? Do you need the money to, from selling it in order to buy the next one? So there's lots of different considerations, but one of the biggest ones I think people oftentimes don't fully understand is the tax implications and how big of a factor that can be. What do you do on, let's talk about on the investment side first. If you're going from investment property to investment property, how do you handle that discussion? Knowing that neither of us are accountants, of course, there's my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
disclaimer
No,
to satisfy our compliance.
yeah. By no means you need the power of your accountant and your estate planner. But taxable events are something you want to avoid. And the perfect tool you mentioned, a 1031 exchange. So a lot of times we'll have a client who maybe gets an unsolicited offer or is thinking of selling a property, and we do a broker opinion of value and tell them like, yes, in this market with those rents or this is what your property's worth. And they just light up like, oh my gosh, this investment I made 25 years ago is worth millions more. Um, as you mentioned, when it's not your primary residence and you don't get the benefit of that 250 or 500,000, you're going to have a pretty sizable taxable event. So a lot of our education to people is how a 1031 works, which is a like for like exchange of properties, and you're deferring those capital gains, pretty much kicking the can until you yourself kick the can, and you get that step up in basis. So we do a lot of 1031 exchanges. A lot of times in our world, there's people who've been in the multifamily world for a long time, and with the changing tenant laws, especially here locally and in the state, they don't want to deal with it anymore. And with insurance costs continuously going up and tenants being more challenging, they're just not into it, and they want to trade into a Starbucks in the Midwest. So they want to understand what their options are. And from that standpoint, a 1031 works really, really well. And we love when people come in and start with us from the beginning, because a lot of it is that 45-day window in which you can to identify that like for like. It happens really quick. So we have a whole process we have where we're showing them previewing properties that could be available. And yeah, that 1031, it's happened before where we didn't find something and they ended up choosing to pay the tax. But yeah, that tool is something I think a lot of people in the investment world are very, very keen on, because it really helps.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm the beneficiary of a handful of those myself. So I've been through the process. And you're right, the 45-day window, basically, for those who don't fully understand how this works, when you sell an investment property and you want to put all of the gains toward the next purchase without paying taxes or deferring the taxes, because eventually you might pay them potentially, we'll see. You have 45 days to identify the next property that you're buying. And 45 days might sound like a lot of time, but when you're talking about analyzing a new investment and finding a home that or a property that you actually want to buy, if it's not the ideal time in the market, or just even getting into escrow or contract within that time frame, because even if you like the property doesn't mean you're going to be the winning bidder. So it really, that time is really tight. It goes by very fast.
And even if you're the winning bidder, you get through your due diligence and you find out, oh wow, this insurance cost is going to be way higher unless we replace all of the electrical panel. That's a big one we're seeing right now. So yeah, it's a skill set, and I think that there's a lot of option for tons. And I think that, again, I keep going back to that advisory role, which I know you play with your clients, is showing all those options ahead of time, right? There's tenants in common deals that people can go into. But we won't bore your audience with all that stuff, but there's a lot of options, and I think the more people can do to educate themselves on what's available can help with that decision of what to do.
Yeah, for sure. And the 1031 exchange is a beautiful thing. One thing that I've learned that you have to be a little careful with is if you eventually want to cash out, before you pass away. Because when you pass away, what happens is you get the step up in basis, which means basically the properties are pretty much not subject to capital gains, because now the value that you compare your sale price to is based on the date of your passing. So it's
Hmm.
a huge benefit. So basically, if you're doing tons, you should pretty much prepare to keep these properties until you're gone, because
Yeah.
I've been through a few layers of them. And so if I wanted to cash out of a property and sell one of them, I'd have to pay all the back taxes on all of them. So literally it would wipe out every penny of gains that I might have. And I looked into it because real estate wasn't selling quite as well as normal over the last couple of years with rates being high.
Yeah.
But it made absolutely no sense. I would have literally nothing left. I'd sell the property and basically pay all of the proceeds to the IRS. So the one thing I always like to share my own experience. I'm very transparent with lots of stuff related to real estate investing, the good, bad, and the ugly. But that was a good lesson, is that if you're doing tons and you're layering them, meaning one after another into another, you have to be prepared to hang on to those properties long term, because you're not likely to want to sell it and just give the money over the IRS.
Yeah. That's a really great point. And on that, there's we have clients that actually use placeholders. So depending on what stage of life they're in, they'll sacrifice something like cash flow because they just don't want any headaches. So they'll actually do a 1031 into something that maybe doesn't have as good as cash flow. A lot of times I see it with people who own student housing.
Hmm.
They've had student housing portfolio and they're just getting up there and they're just like kind of done with it and they want to go into a triple net, or they want a turnkey lower cap rate deal in the core of Santa Barbara where they're like, hey, I'm renting to really good tenants and I don't have to repair this every year. I don't have to deal with vacancy. I don't have to deal with any of that. But that's a really good point. Yeah, you're not going to be keep doing 1030s with eventually having a cash out. But again, that's where the lending side of things gets really interesting if you can educate yourself,
Exactly.
because there are capital events that can happen, and it kind of opened my eyes completely when I started investing in properties, of understanding what tools are actually out there. And when you align yourself with people who understand, that are like-minded and get it, it's quite fascinating. And I understand why so many people have so much success in navigating the real estate world.
Yeah, well, the tax code is so friendly to investors. It's almost unfair
Yeah,
to every
yeah,
other type of investment because you can defer the capital gains, you can put money into other things that are considered like exchanges, even though they're not, managing rental property. Like a DST, Delaware Statutory Trust, is another like Hail Mary type of thing. Or I've seen some older clients who just didn't want to deal with, like you said, didn't want to deal with the process anymore of dealing with tenants. Even if they have property management, you're still dealing with stuff
yeah.
indirectly. And so they just basically want to put the money into a DST and collect their dividend, and ride off into the sunset until they pass, and then maybe they'd sell it to hand the money off to their heirs.
But there are challenges with those too. I mean, those DSTs, we always there's some really good, completely hands-off approaches, but the actuality of something happens to you, if your heirs or your beneficiaries have to get out of those, sometimes it can be very challenging.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of options out there, and again, it's always like the very bottom, unless it's a cash flow situation or something. It's stay away from paying those cap gains because those will sting when you see that number.
Yeah, and they'll eat up whatever you were hoping to get out of it in the first
Yep.
place, or at least a big chunk of it, if not the whole
Yep.
thing. So let's shift a little bit to the residential side, which is, sorry, more my space. So since I'm hosting you, I get to push
Yeah.
you over to that side
Yeah. Yeah.
for a minute. But it's different considerations when you're talking about an owner occupant. And let's say you have somebody who owns a home and they're thinking about, okay, I want to buy my next home for myself to live in. So it's owner occupied. So you don't have some of the same rules as far, you can't do a 1031 exchange on a primary
Hmm.
residence for the most part. So there aren't all these protections that you might be able to use to your advantage. But there's some considerations when people are doing that. Obviously, if you don't have enough money to cover a down payment on the next house you're buying, then you need some sort of bridge financing to be able to do that. But there's other considerations too, as far as just keeping the property as a rental. So what advice would you have for somebody who is owns a primary residence, or what considerations would you tell them to think through if they own a primary residence, they want to buy another primary residence, and they're debating if they should keep the prior home as a rental? Because maybe what we hear often, I got 3% rate, so I'm going to rent it out. It's not
Hmm.
always the best decision sometimes, but like,
Yeah.
what considerations, what things should people be thinking about when they're making those types of decisions?
Yeah, I mean there's so much that goes into that. I mean the first and foremost is the question I have, and I just brought a single family house out on the market yesterday, so I'm in the single family market zone right now. So you caught me at a good time, and I think the biggest thing is like, well, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do if you have to pay cap gains? Like understanding your numbers exactly of, are you getting that 250, that 500, and understanding. And let's just say that there are cap gains and it's significant, understanding the look I get on people's faces as far as becoming a housing provider and potentially renting out their home is kind of twofold. Sometimes it's, I don't know anything about that. I don't want anything to do with it. Other times it kind of piques their interest. They hear the notion of being a housing provider. They hear the notion of, cash flow. They understand these keywords we may have heard in a podcast, or their friends are always talking about real estate. So understanding that if you want to buy your next property and you're in a position in which you do have a lot of equity and you do have a sub 3% mortgage, then you probably realistically want to find out if can you be a housing provider? Can you really step into that market? I have some great connections that are here in town that are kind of the gamuts of property managers, the 5% big corporate ones that are just, you're just a number and you don't want to pay as much, all the way up to people who are going to charge you 10% of the gross rents. They're going to be very hands-on, and sometimes even more. So doing a rental analysis of understanding what your home could sell for as far as a rental is something that's really beneficial. And sometimes when you see those spreads of, hey, here's my mortgage, here's my property taxes, and I can still make money, I would then say, go talk to Mark. Find out what is options do I have of the underwriting of this, and you can understand that. Wow, I can pull some money out from maybe using a HELOC.
Hmm.
A lot of times too is that we're seeing this more now is that yes, there's a sub 3% mortgage, but maybe they only have 5 years left on it, or they only
Right.
have 7 years left on it.
Right.
And when they really
You're
do the
referring to
numbers,
they took an arm
yeah,
problem. Yeah.
yeah, and they're sitting there, and they don't realize that, especially here in Santa Barbara, specifically the city, is there's just a massive housing shortage, and so they might be pleasantly surprised of what the market will command for rents, and even with a different interest rate, they can get a new first, get a large payout, pay off their debt, and then they can still service the loan from having renters in it. And the beauty about that is that maybe you don't have the cash flow, but you're still paying down your principal and you're still gaining the appreciation from the home. And it's that moment when you can talk with someone who owns a property who maybe doesn't view it as an investment, that the light goes off, goes, oh, well, that sounds better than just selling it, or that actually could potentially work. Sometimes a sale is what is necessary. And,
Mhm.
especially in this market, everyone's getting calls from realtors all the time who are good people. They're hard working, or most of them are hardworking, some of them aren't. And they are going to tell them what they want to hear. And it's just a very finicky market where almost everything sells, but at the same time, it's got to be priced right. And I always love to joke. It's people are like, "Well, what's my property worth?" It's worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Which is
Right.
as cheesy as that is, it's the reality of it. So
Yeah. And
long-winded
whatever somebody's
answer,
willing
but
to pay for it is what the comp will show for the next person after that looking to buy.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So again, it comes down to an education process and really understanding what the options are. And I think a lot of times people don't get that from a realtor necessarily, because there's an incentive to get a listing, sell a listing. That's the business that we're in,
Hmm.
and make a living. But it's something from our company's perspective, very unique to us is all of our agents own investment properties. So it's a unique perspective when you're looking at somebody who is a real estate broker, but is saying, don't sell this. Like, you
Right.
should not be selling it. They're
Yeah.
usually taken back.
Yeah, and that advice is valuable. That's what separates the good ones from the not so good ones, the people that are not just looking out for their own bottom line. And, none
Yeah.
of the people in our inner circle act that way, but there are bad apples in every industry, and lending is certainly not
Yeah.
immune from that at all. We've gotten a bad rap over the years, but slowly but surely we're trying to repair it one client at a time.
Yeah.
But that level of trust is really important. And you touched on some critical things. So when we're talking with a client about this situation, what we're looking at is, first of all, do they have the capital that they need for the down payment on the new property? If not, there's a way to borrow it potentially. But then you have to look at what the revised cost of what your loan is costing you, not what you're currently paying. And then it's also on the residential side, again, different underwriting than commercial. But on the residential side, are you going to have enough income to carry both properties? And will a lender, and this varies from program to program, but will a lender let you use proposed rental income if you don't have a tenant secured yet? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the lending program. And do you have enough income to qualify if the lender doesn't let you use the rental income to qualify? Because sometimes you might want to keep it as a rental, but that may prohibit you from qualifying for the property that you're trying to buy, in which case you may decide to sell instead. So sometimes it comes down to qualifications. But I think one thing that often gets missed, and we talk about this with clients a lot, is when you're looking at, okay, should I keep this property as a rental? I have my nice low 3% mortgage, but there's also an opportunity cost. So let's say you have a property worth, I'm making up numbers here, $2 million, and you owe $1 million, and you got a really low rate, and you would have a great tenant who would, you'd make $2,000-3,000 a month every month in perpetuity if you rent it out. Sounds great. And there's definitely appreciation that will probably happen. But what you want to look at is, if you keep that property, let's just keep it simple and say you're not pulling out equity to be able to make the new purchase, but you keep that property, you're making $2,000 a month, that's 24,000 a year. But if you sold the property, you would have, again, oversimplifying it, not factoring in the cost of selling and all that. Let's just say you have $1,000,000 of theoretical proceeds from selling. And now what would happen is if you're buying another home, theoretically, you would need to finance $1,000,000 less than you are now. So that equity is actually costing you money because you don't have access to it to be able to use it to reduce your payments on the next property that you're buying. So when we're looking at this with clients, what we're looking at is, okay, what's your actual cash flow going to look like? That's really critical. But then also not being able to use the equity that you would free up if you did sell the property, the actual payments are higher when you factor that in. You might not actually be making a payment, but you're making a larger payment on the property you're buying because you have to take a larger mortgage than if you sold the property and had $1,000,000 in the bank that you don't have right now. So there's sort of hidden costs and hidden things to think about that I think most people oftentimes miss. It's usually the opportunity cost of like, if you sold, what could you do with that money? And not everybody will put all that as a down payment. Some people might pocket some of it and invest it in other things, which I definitely recommend because the compounding value grows faster than what it costs you on a mortgage. But there's a lot of different considerations that people go through. And like we've talked about, it's different if you're doing an investment property versus a primary residence because the tax laws are different. So we run into this situation a lot, and people oftentimes just look at the cash flow, say, okay, I'm going to get, whatever, $2,000 a month, and it sounds great. But then you have to think about, well, what's the alternative? And
Yeah.
flip the coin both ways. What do you do?
Yeah. And especially in we're in a market in which there's definitely appreciation plays that happen. And with those appreciation plays, you hit the nail on the head. You can have a stabilized asset that's always going to be worth, maybe it goes up 2%, 1% a year, and you have great cash flow, but you could take that equity and roll it into something where you're at the bottom and your ceiling is much higher, especially in the residential market. You can go a different neighborhood, different type of avenue that your cap of as far as what your home could be worth is actually significantly more. So you're spot on that. And then again, it comes back to that advisory role, I think is so key. It's something that is just so important from the standpoint of what's going to work for you and what's going to work for your long-term goals. People, like you said, it's amazing when you talk about compounding and understanding what your options really are, because there's a lot of them and everyone's got different. I've got 3 kids right now. So the idea of, and I'm kind of in that boat. I've got a sub 3, got a great home and a valuable spot here in town, could move up to another spot, but I like the idea of like keeping it simple so I can spend more time with my kids right now and not be, really trying to grind as hard as I probably will, or I did the previous 10 years. I'm still working hard, but just doing it in a way in which your values change, right? Like how you spend your time. It's the one thing you have the most of. So the more you can connect with people on that front and understanding what their values and time are is I think really beneficial.
Yeah, agreed. And people can't underestimate the tax implications because that's a huge part of it. And you
It
hit the nail on the
so
head
much.
with the advisor role and it's not just one advisor, it's lots of advisors that have expertise in all different aspects of it. So it could be obviously a real estate agent, lender, but a 1031 expert, an accountant, an estate planning attorney. Like if I heard this awful story recently about a 97-year-old woman who bought her house for $100,000 like 40 years ago, and now it's worth like 5 million. And she sold the home like as she was in failing health, and probably wrote $1 million check to the IRS for no reason.
Yeah.
So you hear stuff like that, and you're like, it's just that's why we do this podcast, because people just don't know these things. And if education gets to them somehow, not that we have reached to the entire world, not yet. Now that we've
You're
got
getting
you
there.
on a
Oh yeah.
session,
That's
we're going global.
of course.
I just needed you, John. That's all I needed.
Yeah, that there it
A
is.
key to success.
There we go.
But if people just know these things, or they know which professionals to engage, even if they don't know the rules themselves, they just engage with the right people, they can make really much better decisions. And the decisions you make around buying and selling both can have implications in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. And if you look at it over time of what you could do with that lost money and compounding it, the number just becomes like unfathomable. So that's
Yeah,
why I
and
think the
it's
key is just engaging with the right people so that you get the right advice and and take appropriate actions.
probably one of the best things I learned in my career is that I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know, in the sense of it's okay to not know something. It's okay to sit there and go, you know what? You should talk to Mark about that. I think I know the answer, but talk to him. And yeah, no, you want to talk to this estate planner. It's interesting because the gal that connected us, she is one of the best in the realm that she is. And I she's mastered the fact that if anything within, the senior living world or any of that, I mean, Jessica knows. I try to, my whole mantra in real estate is anything real estate related, I want them to call me, but I'll be the first person to say, I'm not the person who's going to be the one to sell or lease this for you, but here's my perspective. And it's something that we all strive for, and I think it's really important that if you can get really, really good at something and you enjoy it, then it's much easier to call it work. I mean, obviously, you're doing with this podcast, it's great, right? You've got your fancy studio, you've got all these things coming along, and it's a lot of work, right? But you understand the outcome of it, and it's something that's going to be beneficial. And that education to people is priceless in my mind, because it's something that allows them to make the right decision. And know, like you said about your stories, there's some real benefits to knowing the right way to do stuff.
There is. Yeah. And that's really what drives us to do this is just the education, because we see so many times these just awful stories about people making uninformed decisions or partially informed decisions because they thought they were the right ones. And then they realize after it's not, it's too late at that point. So, that's what drives me to do this on a regular basis is just getting good information out there, and hopefully it gets in the right hands. And, if we save one person who's in that same situation as that older woman that I mentioned, like we save a
Yeah.
family $1 million. I mean, I don't need to see a penny of that. It just feels good to me to know that we're, on the right path of helping people. So, and I appreciate your help in getting that message.
Yeah,
So I have
of
one
course.
one wrap up question for you that we ask at the end of every session, and not to put you on the spot. It's not going to be. You'll be able to answer it. Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't start sweating or anything.
Okay. It's not the last book I read that I liked, right?
No, it's not. It's
Okay.
not.
Okay.
It's related to
Okay.
what we've been talking about. But I feel like everyone I talk to has one thing that they just rack their brains. And they're thinking, God, if everyone just knew X or knew how to do X, then everything would resolve itself. In relation to the topic that we've been talking about, what would be the one thing that you would want people to take away, either from this session or just in general, just about investing or upgrading from one home to another, even if it's just for their own family?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think in the wholeheartedly, it's understanding what your options are, knowing that one shoe doesn't fit everybody, that there's going to be a handful of options that you can take to get to where you want to go. When it comes to making that second investment, that second home, or wherever it is, you got to have a team. You got to have a team that starts with your real estate broker, your CPA, your lender, the underwriters, understanding all the the property managers, what it's going to take in there, and knowing it's a good thing to have options. I think that's probably the fundamental, is it's good to have options, because when you don't have options, that's when this is your pathway. This is what you have to take. So having options and understanding what those options are absolutely crucial. And you hit the nail on the head, where it's, you got to have a trusted team. These are massive decisions. These are massive assets, liabilities, and upsides. So you might as well have people who know how to do this. And it's pretty cool, the world we live in, where everyone's is an expert in their own way, and everyone just has perspective. I mean, I'm not any kind of rocket scientist by far. I just have perspective, and mine happens to be in the rental market investment space, just as yours happens to be in lending, and how to navigate starting and doing a successful podcast. And so yeah, having options and the right team, I think, is just so crucial, that people think, and then understanding too that people want to help. People aren't, if you genuinely help someone, it does feel good, and it comes back around, right? You hit the nail on the head. If, oh, he wants to see a penny of it. No, no, Mark doesn't. He just wants to know that he helped somebody, and then that person he helped, they might be at a dinner party saying, "Oh, you got to talk to Mark. Oh, you got to talk to him. You got to." It's that notion of doing good business for the right way, and it's something I live by and I absolutely love.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's how we run our business as well. Just be a good resource for people, give them your honest opinion as though they were your family members, and good things come of it. Even if that client, doesn't like what you're saying and they turn from you, I feel like the world has a way of bringing back something good for that quality advice that you give. So,
Absolutely.
well, John, the world needs more people like us who will continue to do that. But like you said, there are good advisors who are not just looking to make a buck,
Yeah.
who will guide you through these decisions. But even if they do charge a buck, it's worth it because the
Yeah.
implications are so massive. We hear these people talking about all the hoopla around agent and commissions and something like that that's been very prevalent in the news lately. They're worth
Yeah.
every penny, even if you have to pay it out of pocket. These
Most of them are.
decisions are, yeah.
Not all of them,
Okay, all
but
right, I'll
if
give you that. But
most of them are, and the ones that know their value are the ones you want to work with. I can tell you that
yes,
because they know their worth. They've done it. Again, I know we won't topic for another day, but it's so interesting because we've negotiating commissions has been something I've had to do since I started when it was just me
hmm
and going against these larger firms and being willing to negotiate the commission. But it's so interesting to me that people are awkward having those conversations when it's like, no, know your worth, know what you bring to the table, and discuss it.
yeah. And hey, if you give one piece of advice that saves the client $1 million in taxes, even if you just said call an accountant and the other
Yeah,
person didn't, you're talking about way far exceeding what it actually costs you to hire that person for their services. So
yeah,
yeah, don't shortchange that. Don't be foolish with your pennies. That's not the way to do it if you're looking to really build a little real estate empire. So, John, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today and providing your insights, which, I kind of knew ahead of time that you and I would see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I think if people are looking for that type of advice, they found a couple people who are more than happy to help, even if it's just to guide them in the right directions. So, John, if people want to find you, what's the best way for them to get to you?
yeah. You can go to our website, which is beachsidepartners.com, or you can find us. Like I said, don't really do social media, but it's Beachside Partners on Instagram. And yeah, our website's best way to email me. My cell phone's up there. I'm always happy to have a conversation and give my perspective. Really appreciate you having me on, and congrats. This is exciting. I've never been in studio doing a podcast, and this is you got a good thing going.
Yeah, well, we're trying to get good information out there, one episode at a time. So thanks for contributing to the effort. We need people like you
Absolutely.
in our corner for sure. All right, well, thank you all for joining us again for the On the Mark Financial Forum and podcast. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a great day.